If you're involved in healthcare or involved in understanding people's bodies for the sake of your own careers or helping other people, this is going to be super, super useful for you. If it's something where you're just doing it for your own interests and maintaining your own, longevity and health and function, then it's right up your alley as well. Okay. Just a little background on me. I'm a chiropractor and a neurologist. I trained in America. So you have to be a doctor to be a chiropractor in America. We're doctors of chiropractic. And then I specialize in neurology. So I'm a neurologist or a chiropractic neurologist. So what that means is that allows us to understand the function of the nervous system well enough that we can actually apply that with the tools of chiropractic. So one of the things that we know is that a lot of people have problems with their joints. And that's what chiropractors focus on, is helping to resolve joint problems, okay? But the joints are controlled by our nervous system. It's all controlled by our brain. So the more we can know about our brain, the more we can help our joints. Okay, does that make sense? Great, okay, so that's a little bit about me and what I do, but it also gives you a little bit of a background on the kind of paradigm that I'm working with and how we're going to be explaining how the body works, okay? Because I'm not just gonna say, you need to do these exercises, this is gonna help you, I want you to touch your toes 10 times. It's nothing like that, okay? It's nothing like that. So, hello. So if there's, yes, there's lots of exercises you could do, but I think what happens is very often people are taught exercises and say, this is what you should do, it's gonna feel good, it's gonna be hard, but you get through it, and then you're gonna be better at the end. I think there's kind of a potential for trailing off if people don't understand why they're doing what they're doing, because it's like, it just feels like a slog, it's something difficult, okay? But if you understand what it's doing to your brain and what it's doing to your nervous system, then you'll probably want to do those exercises. So the final answer is I'm not actually going to tell you what exercises to do, okay? But I'm going to teach you how your movements activate parts of your brain that make your body function better, okay? Sounds like a big thing to sort of throw a net over, okay, and reel in, but we're going to get there, okay? I'm going to try to keep the language at a level that we can all understand. But at the same time, what we're going to do is we're going to build up our understanding of medical language so that we can all be speaking at a higher level. We can cover more ground if we can use bigger words. I'm not just doing this for the sake of showing off big words, but I want you to really understand how your system works. So if we can use some words that describe the system, then it's actually going to make it that much easier to talk about it. Okay? So what we're going to be doing is really talking about just 3 things. Okay? We can handle that, right? 3 things? Okay. There's a little trick. The second thing is kind of 2 things, so maybe we have to call it 4. The first thing we're going to be talking about is stability. So stability means the ability to hold things together. It doesn't mean, stability doesn't mean rigid, it just means stable, okay? So in other words, you could have all the joints in your spine, if they're being held together, they're stable. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't move, okay? It's just that they're held together, okay? But they can still move, they're designed to move. So stability is something, the really first important concept, because if your body doesn't have stability, then the movements that you're doing are going to compromise the integrity of the joint. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if you can't hold the bones together, if you contract a muscle and it's going to pull it to the side, if a joint can't move the way it's supposed to move, if the muscle is pulling it, it's going to actually pull the joint apart, okay? Or compromise its stability, okay? That's a very, very important concept, okay? And we're going to be spending probably the bulk of the time talking about stability. The next thing, you come on in. The next thing we're going to be talking about is strength and flexibility, okay? And those 2 concepts go together, okay? So in other words, every time I'm going to move something, I have to contract muscles to move. You understand that? So if I was sort of turning to the left, I would contract muscles that would turn me to the left. And the inverse, or the sort of sister side of that, is that I need flexibility in other muscles to allow me to move in that way. Okay? So strength and flexibility work together. So we're going to talk about how your body manages those capacities of strength and flexibility. Hello. Hi. So if you're not strong, okay, and you're not flexible, then you're not going to be able to move very much. Okay? So can you think of just a little example where If, for instance, someone was lacking strength, actually, let's go back one step. If you don't have stability, then what happens when you bend over to get something out of the fridge? What's happening to your spine? Is it being held together while you're bending, or is it allowed to move into a strange position? If it's allowed to move in a way it's not designed to move, then you're potentially compromising that joint. Okay? So it's really, really important that your body has that function of stability to maintain the integrity of the joint. Okay? If your body senses that you're going to contract a muscle, which could compromise a joint, then what it can do is it can actually bypass the strength of that muscle. It can switch off that muscle to ensure that you don't contract it. Like sometimes someone will go to pick something up, and then the body senses that their spine is being compromised, and then everything gives way. They say the legs just gave way. Okay? It's not always because they've damaged something. It's that their body senses they are about to damage something, and it switches the muscles off. Okay? How many people have been to me as a patient here? It's a quick show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, okay. It's about 8 of you. That's good. So sometimes we do checks on muscles, and we'll do checks and we'll find that a particular muscle is weak. Okay? That muscle might be weak because your body can't switch the muscle on effectively, or it might be your brain switching that muscle off because when you contract that muscle, you're kind of, that force is actually going through an unstable joint. So your body will go, oh my gosh, if I'm resisting this force, it's actually going to compromise my shoulder or my neck. So your body has the capacity to switch that off. So sometimes we see weaknesses because of a compromise on stability. Does that make sense? Okay? So you can see how these concepts build on each other. You need stability. That's the most important root thing. If you don't have stability, you can lose strength, as I said in that example. Okay? If your body senses that the joints are unstable, then what it's going to do is it's going to start tightening up other muscles to try to reduce the motion to the joint so that you don't end up in that compromised position. Okay? And what does that affect? Your flexibility. Okay? So you can see how strength and flexibility can be compromised just as your body is trying to deal with instability. Okay? These are pretty big concepts. Everyone got that already? That's the main part of what we're talking about. So if you get that, all we're doing is just going deeper into that. Okay? Is that cool? You guys get it? The third concept we're going into is endurance. Okay? Endurance just means being able to do something again and again and again and again and again and not get tired or not wear out or not compromise your strength or flexibility or stability. Okay? So being able to use a muscle effectively means that everything else underlying it has to be functioning very well as well. Because if, for instance, we go back to that example I just gave where someone has lost instability, their body has switched off certain muscles so that you don't contract a muscle which is going to compromise the joint. Okay? In other words, your body doesn't want you to contract a muscle which is going to move the joint in a way that could damage the joint further. Okay? So it can switch off certain groups of muscles. So as a doctor, I can see that. I read those signs, if you understand. So you'll lose some strength. Other muscles will become tight to, again, further restrict the motion of that joint. Okay? And then, how capable do you think a muscle is of contracting if some of the muscles have been switched off and other muscles have been switched on to a high degree to keep the joint from moving? Your endurance is going to just go down through the floor. You'll have very, very poor endurance because you're trying to contract a muscle which has been switched off. Okay? Or you're trying to contract a muscle which is already super engaged. Okay? You only have like so many fibers of muscles that can, so in a muscle fiber you have a certain number of little bits of muscle that can contract. So if we were to count it and you say there's 100 fibers, when the muscle is tight, you might say, well, maybe 60 of those fibers are contracting. So how many left do you have? Okay, simple math, anyone? 40? Okay, great. So if you have 40% of the muscles ready to contract, how much endurance are you going to have? You're going to have 40% of the endurance. How much strength are you going to have? Probably about 40%. How much flexibility? about 40%. You know, if the muscle is contracting, you're compromising strength, flexibility, and endurance. Does that all make sense? Okay, so that's the whole talk. That's everything we're going to talk about. So thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. It's been great, and I love the support. What we're going to go into now, sorry, what was your names?
Emma.
Emma? I met you two before as well, right?
I used to teach your kids at
Oh, wow. Oh, great. Okay, cool. I thought it was a familiar face. Emma and what?
Peter.
And Peter. Okay, great. I know Anita. Who else just came in? Keith. Okay, great. Okay, nice to meet you, Keith. So, what we're going to do, does everyone get all that?
Yeah.
Is there anyone that's a little bit lost? It's okay to have questions because we're going to really go into this, okay? Like, really, really go into it, okay? But it's going to be fun, I promise. But that's all that we're talking about. There's no surprises anywhere in there. But the key is that once you understand how all of these functions work, then you're going to know automatically why this type of exercise is good for you. You know, why is yoga good for you? Why is Tai Chi good for you? Okay? Why are all these things good for you? You might not know yet, but you will in about an hour. Okay? And it's going to be really, really, really fun. Okay, you guys ready?
Yeah.
We're going to dive in now. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is we're going to go straight into stability. Okay? So stability is achieved by muscles which are close to the joint, so that when they contract, they hold the joint together. Okay? It's easiest to explain in terms of the spine. So I'm going to talk mostly about the spine as we're talking about examples, but the same mechanism exists in all the other joints. It's just a little bit complicated because of the layering of muscles in other joints. Okay? But basically in the spine, you can imagine there's sort of a center line in the spine. If you're going to draw the spine, you start with a line, right? Everything that's closest to the spine, all the muscles that are closest to the spine, don't really have a very powerful effect to move it to the sides. Okay? They really just hold the whole thing together. And if you actually look at the shape of the spine, I actually ordered some models, but I didn't arrive in time. But if you look at the shape of the spine, when the muscles contract, it actually just holds it together. Okay? When those muscles contract, you know what it does to your posture? It gives you really good posture. Okay? So people talk about good posture. When those spinal muscles contract, your posture is like perfect. If you see like a baby, at first they can't sit up or do anything. But the first muscles they start to activate are those spinal intrinsic muscles. So the first ones to switch on. And when babies sit up, how do they sit up? They sit like this, like they're playing video games? No, babies sit up really, really straight because those spinal intrinsics actually just hold the joints together. It's super, super, super important. So those are the things that are closest to the midline, closest to the spine. When they contract, it gives you good posture. Okay? How do we switch them on? So in other words, you have muscles in between each of those joints that switch on. So we have names for all the joints. We have cervical, thoracic, from here to here, and lumbar spines. So if I say to Serge, I'd like you to contract intertransversarii, okay, which is one of those muscles. So I want you to just think about that muscle between L3 and L4. Go ahead and do that for me. Yeah, I know you can't. No, you can't. Sorry. Okay, so there's lots of these muscles that contract, but they aren't under conscious control. Damn, sorry guys, sorry to let you down. You can't consciously turn those muscles on. Okay? Yeah, it's a problem, isn't it? Well, thank goodness, because if we were left to contract those muscles, we'd probably be in much worse shape than we are, because you don't, just let your brain manage that. So in other words, there's sort of deep levels of our brain, very, very old deep levels of our brain that are designed to make those muscles contract reflexively. Okay, so certain stimulation is going to turn those muscles on. Okay, so we don't have to think about turning them on, but there are things that we can do which will turn them on. Okay, does that make sense? One of the interesting things, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a hint about this, we're going to come back to it in a few more minutes, is that the muscles that move our eyes, okay, we call extraocular muscles. So when you're looking around, these muscles, they're controlled by a part of your brain that also controls those intrinsic muscles. So even though when I look to the left, I'm not actually turning those muscles on. It's controlled by the same part of the brain that turns those muscles on. So there's almost a little bit of a kind of a back door into turning those muscles on in your spine, okay? So it is true that you could do exercises with your eyes and stimulate that part of your brain that's going to switch on those intrinsic muscles, okay? So there's a little trick in that. We're going to come back to that in a few minutes. But the bigger part of the story, I want to give you the whole concept, is that that part of the brain that switches on those intrinsic muscles is basically around what's an area called the vestibular nuclei, okay? And vestibular, has anyone ever heard the term vestibular? Antonella's heard this, you can't, okay? Anita, you know vestibular? Yeah? Do you know vestibular? Yeah? Okay. So vestibular is basically, the vestibular apparatus is a part of our inner ear. So our ear has kind of two functions. Okay, so we have hearing and we have our motion sense. Okay? So we have what are called semicircular canals and we have otoliths. Okay? And they sense different things. So this is part of the anatomy lesson, okay? Is that the semicircular canals are like these fluid-filled canals. They're like little circles of bone, and inside there's fluid, okay? And what happens is as you turn your head, the fluid essentially kind of stays still and your head moves around it, which sounds like a really bizarre concept, but we've all seen it. If you've ever had like a glass of whiskey or orange juice and you have an ice cube floating in it, and you turn that glass, what happens to the ice cube? It like stays in the same place, right? You're like, you can't get that ice cube to move. It's like it's in where you want to drink and you like try to turn the glass and you can't get the ice cube out of the way, right? So what happens is as you turn the glass, essentially what's happening is the fluid is staying in the same place and the glass moves around the fluid. Okay? The semicircular canals works the same way. There's a fluid there and your brain senses that your head is moving in relation to this fluid, which is relatively stationary. Okay? And the way it does it is there's little hairs on the inside. Imagine you have the glass, and there's little tiny hairs sticking into the glass. And when you turn the glass, what's going to happen is the glass is going to move in relation to the hairs. So as you turn the glass, all the hairs are going to flick to the side because the water is going to go past the glass, or the glass is going to pass the water. You get it? Okay? So next time you look in the glass, if there's hairs in the glass, don't drink out of the glass. Okay? But for the sake of your vestibular system, this is very, very important because each one of those little hairs has a little nerve ending on it, and it can sense which way the water is moving in relation. They're super, super sensitive. So as you turn your head, like if anyone was sitting in a chair, if Pierre was sitting in a chair here, and we turn the chair, and his eyes are closed, he could tell that he's moving entirely because of the vestibular system. Okay? So that vestibular system, that vestibular sense, is telling you your position. Okay? That's pretty cool, isn't it? This is one of the most interesting things about this function is that it's a very, very old function. Okay? It first showed up in jellyfish hundreds of millions of years ago. Okay? So jellyfish don't know a lot about where they're going. They're not particularly well educated in anything. Okay? Conversations with jellyfish are boring. Okay? And they're not good company when you're swimming either. So, but jellyfish have this sense. But actually, even more primitive to that is another part of this vestibular system, which is called the otolith. Okay? And the otolith is still in the same part of your inner ear, but it's a different sense organ. Instead of having fluid in it that's with the little hairs, what it does is it almost has like little hairs that stick up, and there's little crystals on the end of it. Okay? So what happens is when you tip your head to the side, the otolith can tell your brain that you're tipped to the side because these little hairs bend, and the crystals have a mass or weight to them, and so they bend to the side, and then it triggers the little sensors in the nerves to say you're bending to the left. Okay, or you bend this way, and it senses and says you're bending to the right. Okay, this is the otolith. Okay, so we have tilt sensors. Okay, and we have these sort of motion sensors. Okay, so what we're going to do is set up a little bit of another level of language here. We have motion sensors, okay, like the semicircular canals, and we have position sensors, okay? They sense the position, okay? So you need to know what your position is, and you need to know what your motion is. If you don't know what your position is, it's hard to control your motion. Okay? We have lots of motion and position sensors, and we're going to talk more about those, but this is one of the most primary. Okay? The vestibular system is one of the most important sensors for motion and position. I remember I said this is old. It's been in the nervous system of animals for hundreds of millions of years. So if you look at like our nervous system versus, say, the nervous system of a chicken, or even go back to a jellyfish, there's things in common and there are things that are different. Okay? So as you're kind of working up through higher level forms, you see what happens is different functions get stacked on them. Okay? So say, for instance, a snake will have a nervous system, has a brain and a spinal cord, and has muscles that move it around, but doesn't have limbs. So it doesn't have the part of the brain that controls limbs. Do you understand? But if you're looking at higher things that have limbs, for instance, you need to have a part of the brain that controls that. However, the same part of the brain that controls position and tilt in the snake exists in us. Okay? And where it lives in the brain is very, very deep. Okay? So close to what we call the midbrain. So you have your spinal cord and you have your brain stem. So in other words, you have your brain. Let's start with the brain. Okay? And then the brain comes down to a spinal cord, or sorry, to a brain stem, and then down to your spinal cord, which is where all the nerves come and go out to your body. Okay? Just to keep it simple. So around this brain stem area is where a lot of these controls are happening. Okay? So we have those controls as well as the snake, but we have lots of things stacked on top of it. Whenever these newer things are added to the brain, they come further away from the center and higher up. There's new areas that build up at the top. So we have cortex, and we have neocortex. Neocortex gives us all the new functions, things that make us human. So all human functions happen in the higher centers, and all the lateral things are happening with other new things as well, like limbs. Okay, just as a basic explanation. So you get that? So what's interesting is that the oldest things are very midline. Okay, they're very midline and centered around the brainstem. There's a lot of focus on this stuff now because anything that's new always references the old. So in other words, if I went to go and do something very human, like run and like jump over a pole, okay? Or I went to do something, sort of big and human, like dribble a basketball and run and throw it into a hoop. That requires a lot of control. And I still need to reference my position and my motion. So all of these older senses are being used to a very, very high degree, okay? But in humans, they work in a slightly different way. So in other words, everything's being referenced in the old system, but at the same time, there's all these other things that are happening at the same time, okay? So the point is, it's old and it's really important, okay? It's old and it's important. That's what you need to bear in mind. The neocortical things, the newer functions, actually help to regulate other functions, okay? So I'm just going to talk a little bit more about the vestibular system because there's some really, really important concepts here that are really core to everything we're talking about. So the vestibular system is giving us that sense of where we are, how we're moving, and what our position is, okay? That feeds into this area called the vestibular nuclei. But you know what else feeds into it? Vision. Because remember, this vestibular nuclei, imagine this is just trying to figure out where we are. There's lots of the parts of the brain that figure out where we are. We're going to kind of keep it a little bit simple, okay? Easy to understand, okay? I'm not diluting anything, but we're going to try to keep it as simple as possible. So that vestibular system is really about understanding where you are in the world, okay? So you have your inner ear, which is giving you that kind of sense of your movement and position, okay, from your inner ear. And then we have your vision, which is saying where the horizon is. So if you tip like this, the horizon is going to go like this. You're going to tip like this, the horizon goes down like that. So your visual sense is feeding in to give you a sense of where you are. And the third thing is what we call proprioceptive sense. So that's like I feel the ground, but also in a big way, what the position of your neck is, and the sensors in your neck are telling your brain. Okay, so if my head tips like this, how is that telling me where my head is? I have my visual system saying the room is like this now. I have my inner ear sensing that my head tipped to the side so that semicircular canals sense the fluid moving this way, okay? The otolith is saying as well that there's this head tilt. And then my proprioceptors are saying there's pressure on this side and there's stretch on this side. Okay? You guys all got that? You got it? That's huge, okay? That's huge, okay? I promise you, now you know more than most people know about how your brain works. So thank you for coming. It's been really great seeing you. What we're going to do is going to go another level, okay? So all of these things are feeding into the vestibular system. And what's the output of the vestibular system? I'll tell you what, there's a pathway. So in other words, there's nerves, and the vestibular nuclei is a bunch of nerves. And then they send signals down your spine, called the vestibulospinal pathway. What do you think that might do? Just take a guess. Take a guess. What do you think that does?
Balance.
It has to do with balance, absolutely. So this is a very, very old part of the brain. It's a very essential part of the brain, and it's something that we rely on for absolutely everything. What do you think the vestibulospinal pathway does? It goes to muscles. What do you think those muscles are going to do for you? Serge?
Movement.
Yeah, it's your intertransverse area between L3 and L4, right? So it's all those, whatever, there's lots of them, okay? But it's going to activate those muscles that stabilize your spine. That's pretty cool, isn't it? So the sensors that are sensing tilt and motion are going to turn on the muscles that stabilize my spine, okay? Now we're going to feed back to what we said before. Remember how I was saying when you turn your eyes, that activates that part of the brain that switches on those intrinsic muscles? Okay, so moving your eyes helps activate those intrinsic muscles. That's good for you, right? What happens when you're just sitting all day looking at a computer and your eyes aren't moving very much? You just go, your body just sort of melts, right? You don't feel great. You're like, oh, I want to get up and I want to move. I want to do something, right? What happens when you get up and you move? Okay, you're stimulating your vestibular system. You're stimulating your visual system. You're stimulating your proprioceptors. What does that make you do? It makes you feel good. You feel like I'm awake and alive. My body feels good now. All I need to do is move and activate my body, and I'm going to feel more stable. I'm just going to feel good, right? Does that make sense? Okay, so again, now you know more than anyone else knows about how your body works. So can you think of a few exercises that would incorporate things like that? Pilates, okay, yoga, okay, anything, walking, you know, the gym, all those things you do over there, all that's going to be great for you. All those things are stimulating these sensors, which are going to activate that part of your brain that's going to promote stability. Is that cool? That's really cool, I think. That's really, really cool, okay? So, where does it go wrong? Right? Where does it go wrong? Okay, why doesn't that work? I mean, what's happening? Okay?
We keep our eyes fixed in the one place for a long time.
Yeah, one thing is not using the system. If we're not using the system, it doesn't get activated as much, so then we start to not feel as well. Okay? One little tiny side tidbit is that this activation of your body actually activates other parts of your brain that have to do with autonomic system, have to do with the sort of replenishment and the function of your body. So the autonomic system is controlling those other automatic functions, particularly about getting energy into your body, metabolizing that energy, storing the energy, and then getting the energy to where it needs to go, to your brain, to your muscles. Okay? So if you're not stimulating your body, you're also not activating that autonomic system, which is going to promote your long-term health in terms of how you acquire energy. So what I'm saying is, when you eat food, you need to have a system that can recognize what the food is, secrete the enzymes, create intestinal motility, move those things through your digestive system, absorb that, metabolize those materials, put them into storage, into the liver, into fats, metabolize and activate those things, put that energy into the bloodstream and get it to the muscles, get it to the brain so you can go and do things. That's autonomic function, okay? That whole system is driven by body motion, okay? Hunters, gatherers, you know? Okay, we go and we gather food. That's kind of stimulating our system, you know? And then we get food and we eat it, okay? It helps keep that whole system going. These two functions live right next to each other, okay? Live right next to each other in the brain stem, okay? It's called the vagus, or the vagal nucleus, okay? The vagus controls autonomic function. Vagus controls autonomic function. You know where it lives? Right next to the vestibular nuclei. Are they related? Absolutely, okay? They talk to each other a lot, okay? So if your whole system's being driven, okay, you're also activating that ability to acquire energy through your digestion, metabolize it, and be able to put that energy where it needs to go. Okay, that's kind of cool too, right? When you exercise, you feel good. You have energy, you feel like your body has energy, you can think more clearly, okay? Everything kind of works. If you're sitting in the computer and you're doing not so much stuff, it's not going to work as well, okay? So, how does the system fail? How does it break down? Yes, not moving is one of the things, but as well, you have to understand that the brain is a little more complex than what I'm describing right now. I haven't told you everything about the brain, okay? There's a little bit more, okay? A little bit more that you need to know is that you have this big, energy-hungry thing sitting at the top called the neocortex, okay? Neocortex, new brain, okay? Neocortex uses a lot of energy, okay? So what that means is it really needs to be stimulated in order to function, okay? It needs a lot of energy going to it, a lot of electrical energy going to it, and it uses a lot of fuel, okay? Because it's new, it does all the things that are new to us. So that's everything human. We'll leave it at that for the moment. We'll dip into that, in and out of that. But everything human. So just being able to stand upright is one of the things. We can stand on two legs fairly well, most people, okay? Your dog could do it for a few minutes. You're like, hey, look what my dog can do. You like, hold a little biscuit. It's like, ah, wow, look at that. He's like, you know, hopping up and down. You're like, isn't he cool? But he's not going to do that all day, right? He doesn't have enough neocortical ability to inhibit those flexor muscles that are keeping him on all fours. So if we break the muscles down into flexors and extensors, okay, when you're fully flexed, you're in fetal position, okay? That's fully flexed, okay? Extension is when you're standing up like this, okay? So this is extension, okay? The easiest way to remember what muscles are flexors and extensors is to think about a tree hugger. Is there any tree huggers? Okay, tree huggers? Okay, good, it's tree huggers. I like tree huggers. When you hug a tree, okay, you can do this at home or wherever, okay? If you can find a tree in Malta, okay? So just go find a tree. This is the homework, right? Go find a tree and give that tree a big hug, okay? When you give the tree a big hug, all the muscles that are touching the tree are flexor muscles, okay? So those are muscles that are on the inside of your arms, okay? And when you go like this, it's on the muscles on the inside here, okay? Those are all the flexor muscles, okay? So when you hug the tree, those are flexor muscles. What ends up happening is, as we develop, our upper extremity externally rotates, okay? So the flexor muscles end up on the front, and the lower extremity internally rotates. So the flexor muscles end up on the back. So these are flexors, same muscles, okay? And these are flexors, okay? So the front muscles are flexors on the upper extremity, and sort of the back muscles essentially are the flexors on the lower extremity. So the reason I'm mentioning all this is it's super, super important. Your neocortex is super, super connected to the ability to inhibit flexor muscles. So Scrappy the dog, no, what's your dog's name? Do you have a dog? No dog. Who has a dog? Lenny. So Lenny might be able to, can Lenny stand on two legs? Okay, so Lenny can stand on, not for long, okay, so I'm not going to comment on his neocortex, but I'm sure he's a great dog. He what?
Sometimes I dance with him and I hold him.
Dancing, dogs love to dance too. So if Lenny can get on two legs, what he's trying to do is he's trying to inhibit these flexors, okay? So he can extend, but he doesn't do it very well, you know? We don't need to bring the dog in, you've all seen it. When the dog is trying to stand on two legs, it doesn't do it very well because it can't inhibit those flexors very well, okay? And the extensor muscles aren't able to be activated enough to be able to sustain that function, okay? When we develop a neocortex, we develop the ability to dampen those flexor muscles and turn on the extensor muscles so that we can do it for a long time, like endurance, okay? The ability to extend over time is dependent on the ability to inhibit flexor muscles, which are bigger muscles, okay? You think about your biceps or your triceps. You don't think about my biceps, but think about your biceps, okay? Your biceps are bigger muscles, and your triceps are like those tiny little muscles on the back, right? So we can do things with both of them, but the reason we can actually, push things up and do things repeatedly is because we can actually kind of calm down those flexors and switch on the extensors. Okay? If that part of the brain that calms down the flexors fails, what do? You go back into flexion. Can anyone think of any kind of injury that happens to people when they go into flexion? Anyone think of that? Like a stroke, maybe? Okay? So what happens in a stroke? People end up, like this, right? When you have a stroke, if it affects the part of the brain that's going to control this inhibition of those muscles, you're going to end up stuck in flexion. Okay? If that part of the brain can't work, you're going to be flexed. And it's really, really hard to get those people to extend again. Okay? So this is a real-world example. Neocortex is a new part of the brain, so because it's new, it's also the most fragile in the sense that it's kind of the first thing to fail when we get older, or we don't stimulate it enough. Remember I said it's really power hungry. If we don't give it the stimulation that it needs, it's not going to have enough power to keep itself going and keep functioning the way that it should. So if we ever do that, if we ever starve it or don't give it enough to keep it at least at a sort of homeostasis, then what's going to happen is those functions are going to degrade over time. So what would that look like? What happens to people when they get older? Do they walk around like this, like really well extended and have great posture and everything's working well, I feel great? No, people start flexing forward, okay? As you lose the ability to inhibit those flexors, you start to flex forward, okay? So people's posture will change, okay? And then they'll come in and they'll tell me, they'll say, oh wow, I have this pain in my joint. And I'll say, well, it's just because your neocortical output has been decreased. So what's happened is your flexors have increased their tension. It's inhibited the extensor muscle. So whenever you try to contract your extensor, you can't. You can't contract it effectively because the flexor muscle, which you're not inhibiting, is overriding it. Do you understand that? So they say, well, no, it's not that at all. It's tennis elbow. And I said, no, that is what I'm saying, okay? If these flexor muscles on your arm are contracting, they're inhibiting the extensor muscles. So you say, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this big lever in my hand with a net on the end of it and a ball, and I'm going to go running, and the ball's coming at me about 100 miles an hour, and I'm just going to hit it with this huge lever force, which is going to bend my arm this way and put a big demand on my brain to perceive that stretch and to respond with an equal and opposite force to contract that muscle, to not only stabilize the muscle, but move the joint the way I want it to go. And what's going to happen? It's going to fail. So what's going to happen is the muscle can't sense that quickly enough, can't respond appropriately enough. So when you have that force, it's going to put a stress on the joint, and on the muscle particularly, because the muscle can't sense it effectively enough and contract fast enough because it's being inhibited. You know what I mean by inhibited? So you excite a muscle, it makes it contract. You inhibit the muscle, it turns the tension of the muscle down. But also turns down the responsiveness of that muscle. So when the muscle is being inhibited, it can't respond as quickly. So I have this huge leverage, this huge force, this ball hitting my racket. It's bending my arm this way, okay? And I have to be able to, you think about in milliseconds what's happening. That ball hits the racket, it's going to turn my hand this way, and I need these muscles to sense that, to be able to react to contract that muscle effectively, but the muscles are being inhibited. So what happens is the muscle can't take that force. So that stretch goes into a little sensor at the end of the muscle, okay, called the Golgi tendon organ. If you stimulate that fast enough, what it will do is actually decrease the tension of the muscle even more. Okay? That lives in the muscular tendinous junction, which also is going to take the brunt of that force. So you could end up with little sort of tears or irritations in the muscle, we call tendinitis. Okay? And then we call that, say in the elbow, we call that tennis elbow. Okay? Or extensor tendinitis, you could call it. Okay? So these are your wrist extensors. You're going to end up with this tear, and then they're going to say, no, it's not my neocortex at all. It's my tennis elbow. We're talking the same thing. Okay? Another joint, your shoulder. There's muscles that create stability in your shoulder. So it's the same thing. Say you're playing tennis and you do this thing with your shoulder, but the extensor muscles in your shoulder are being inhibited. When you go and you have this force, your body can't stabilize the shoulder, and the shoulder's going to move in a weird way, and then it's not going to be able to stabilize. You're going to put a strain on your shoulder. You could irritate the tendons. Okay? If you have, say, for instance, a lack of inhibition of the flexor muscles, they're going to get tight, and people's shoulders will roll in like this. Okay? They say, oh, I have all this pain right here. Right? Can't lift my arm because that flexor muscle is keeping you from lifting your arm and extending it up and back. Does that all make sense now? It's starting to look a little bit obvious, isn't it? When we look at different things that people have. Say, for instance, carpal tunnel syndrome, okay? People using all these flexors. You don't type with extensors, okay? If you could, maybe it'd be better for you. I probably wouldn't be, I'm not that fast anyway, but I would definitely be slower if I was trying to type like that. But you're flexing, okay? Most of the force is in flexion, not in extension, okay? So if we're doing lots of flexor activity, okay? What are we doing to that balance of flexors versus extensors? We're promoting flexion. You're doing an exercise which is making those flexors more capable of contracting. At the same time, it's inhibiting or changing the ability of those extensors to activate. Does that make sense? Okay? Carpal tunnel, okay? Tennis elbow. Shoulder problems, like you go on and on about shoulder problems, all kinds of things in the shoulder, okay? How about your pain in the back of the hip? People come in, oh, I got sciatica. Who's got sciatica? Everyone's got sciatica, right? So you got this pain in the back of the leg, in the back of your hip. What's that mean? Okay? What's happening to tree huggers? It's these muscles in here, okay? What happens when these muscles back here contract? Okay? It's going to switch off the muscles that create extension, okay? So there's flexion and then there's extension. So the ability to kind of bring your leg out ends up weak. Okay? So the extensor muscles get tight, and then what you end up with is basically all this tension around the back of your hip. Usually it isn't a problem with the sciatic nerve, okay? We call it sciatic distribution of pain. So in other words, you have pain that goes down the back of your leg, but it's primarily because of that tension, okay? Primarily because of the tension either in the deep gluteal muscles or in your hamstrings, okay? Anita, have you seen these before, right? A lot, yeah. So, sciatica, same thing. Say, for instance, people say, oh, I got this knee pain, you know? My knee hurts. Well, it's because, again, these flexor muscles are tight, and it's not allowing that to function very well, okay? People say, oh, I was walking along, nothing happened, and this hole just jumped out in front of me, and I twisted my ankle, right? How did you twist your ankle? Well, let's think about it. When you stepped into that hole, your foot rolled off to the side, but because the muscles that bring your foot back are extensors, and they've been inhibited because of the flexor tension, the capacity of those extensor muscles to sense the stretch and respond with the appropriate tone to stabilize the joint failed. Does that make sense? Yeah, that's awesome. You guys get it? Okay? This is very exciting. Like I said, you understand how your body works better than most anyone out there does now. Okay? That's pretty cool, isn't it? Everyone like that? You're smiling. You like it, right? No one's asleep yet. Okay, good. This is super, super important. Okay? So this is how your brain has an effect on your capacity to move around in the world, to have a pain-free life. Okay? But also what it's doing is that when you're extending, you're stimulating receptors that go where? Take a guess. When you stimulate extension, You're going to stimulate the part of the brain that facilitates extension. Neocortex. When you extend, you're stimulating receptors in the joints. Okay? Sensors in the joints. You're stimulating the muscles around the joints. Okay? These motions are going to activate everything. Vestibular area, okay? Which is going to promote stability. But also those motions particularly are going to self-reinforce. In other words, they're going to go to the neocortex, light up your neocortex. Okay? What do you do when you're asleep and you wake up? You go, you take a big breath of air and you extend and you go, oh, and you go, yeah, I'm ready. Okay? You feel good. You got air into your system, your body needs oxygen. You did a big extension, you contracted those extensor muscles, you've inhibited those flexor muscles that have been asleep for so long. You activate those extensor muscles and boom, it just lights up your brain. All that electrical stimulation goes right up to your brain and it just turns it on. Does that make you more or less capable of extending? More capable, right? You promote activation of neocortex. It's going to promote the ability to have neocortical functions. That includes extension, but also includes everything. We all have jobs, we all do stuff, we all have to think and do things. Well, most people do, unless you're, well, I won't make any comments, but some of the people that are like working in the roads and stuff, what are they thinking? Anyway, some people think when they work and some people don't, okay? No comment. Anyway, the point is, you should be able to think when you're doing your job, okay? If you're someone that's sort of flexed over like this all day long and you're not able to extend, what's your capacity to activate your neocortex? It's less, right? Okay? You all get that, right? So that's kind of cool. So, we're going to go back and kind of roll this into what we started with. Stability, okay? The stabilizing muscles in your spine, when they contract, what do? Do they flex you or do they extend you? They extend you, okay? This is a very, very old system, okay? So the stabilizing muscles, remember how the baby sits up? Baby sit up straight or baby sit like this? Baby sits up straight, okay? Because when that very, very deep, very old system. Now we're comparing old systems and new systems, okay? The very old system is that vestibular spinal output to those intrinsic muscles. They're going to give you spinal stability. But the spinal stabilizing muscles, if you just switch all those on, you're going to have good posture, okay? What does that do for your neocortex? Is that good for your neocortex? Yeah, it is. So all we have to do is get those muscles switched on, stand up, move around a bit, and then your brain's going to light up and you're going to feel good. Okay? So thank you all for coming. That's the basis of it. You guys get that? You see how there's like layers that build on each other? And it keeps getting more and more exciting, doesn't it? Because it's like we're talking about different parts of the brain now. You know about your neocortex. You know about the stabilizing muscles. You know what's voluntary and involuntary. So we're talking about the involuntary reflexive muscles and those spinal intrinsic muscles. Okay? And we talked about the volitional things. You can control muscles. I can say, I'm going to switch on my extensor, and you can do it, right? So, is everyone good with this? You want to stand up and have a little stretch? Let's just stand up. Everyone stand up. Have a little stretch, okay? Okay?
How do you stimulate the neocortex?
We're going to get there. Don't worry. We're going to cover it. We're going to cover it. Everyone just stand up. Have a big stretch. Okay. That's it. A few breaths in. Feels good, doesn't it? Okay? It's not great sitting in a little ball on the floor, but just shake it out a little bit. Okay? It feels good. Okay? Next thing we're going to talk about is while you're all standing, I just want you to feel something, okay? We're going to talk about kind of patterns of motion. Okay? So I want you everyone just put your feet a little bit like shoulder width apart, maybe a little further. Okay? Just feel yourself balanced. And what we're going to do is you've probably seen these like Tai Chi exercises where they go like this, right? Okay? So we're just going to kind of mimic that just a little bit. Okay? So what we're going to do is I want you to just stand in a way that you can be like this and put your hands out in front of you like this, like you're holding a big ball. Okay? And then what we're going to do is just turn your body to the side, so everyone turn their body to the right. Okay? And then what you're going to do is let that right arm drop down, bring the left one up, and we're going to cross over like this, just come across. So what you're going to do is just grab that ball, you're going to roll that ball across you, okay? And then bring the other arm up, grab the ball, and bring it back, okay? So just sort of motion. And what we're going to be thinking about is just think about your fingertips, and you're making like a figure 8 motion. So just everyone watch me for a second. So your fingers are going like this. Your hands going like your arms are going in like a figure 8 position like this. Okay. So just do this for a second. See what that feels like. Okay. That feels pretty cool, right? Okay. Okay. You can keep doing it if you want. Okay. But I want to show you something else. While you're still standing up, I want to show you something else. Is that when we move through a figure 8 motion, okay? So if I'm walking towards someone, okay, your arms swing, okay? What's happening to your shoulders is this shoulder comes forward, okay, and this shoulder comes forward, so we're walking, okay? And your shoulders are coming forward and back, and your hips are coming forward and back. So what you're doing is you're creating a twist in your spine, and your whole body is standing on one leg, and then it lifts this leg, and then you stand on that leg, and so your hips are going like this, okay? So if you sort of imagine your hips are going like that, your shoulders are going like that. If you exaggerate, you can see it, right? Okay? So your body is doing this figure 8 motion, okay? So everyone just sort of march in place a little bit and just sort of feel how you can lift your hips and your shoulders. Just kind of accentuate that hip and shoulder motion as you move, okay? You feel it, right? I mean, everyone's like, just see what it feels like naturally, okay? That natural motion. Think about like jive talking, da, 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 da. Little disco, right? Okay? Okay, you can stop. Okay, I know, it's great. We'll do more. Sit down for a second, okay? So, the reason I had you all do that, just to wake you up, we're about halfway, I think. How are we doing on time? Where are we? Let me see. It's 5, so we have about half an hour. Okay, I'm going to try to leave enough time that we can have questions at the end, but we're going to try to keep it very, very practical, okay? The reason I had you all do that, for one, you wake you up, get a little bit of extension, stimulate neocortex, get a little oxygen, get your blood moving, wake you up, okay? The next thing is I want you to see how your body is designed to move, okay? And our body naturally moves in this sort of figure 8 motion, okay? We naturally do that. Pretty much all the joints, really all the joints, if you look at them, depending on where you're looking at them, you can see that figure 8 motion. Okay? So we know that this kind of pattern of motion is something that our body is tuned to feel, because it's actually the way we're designed to move. So if we look at the way we're designed to move, it makes sense that that's going to activate our brain in exactly the right way. It would make sense, wouldn't it? It wouldn't make sense if we moved this way and it was like making our body fall apart, okay? That figure 8 motion, we call like, just simply for walking, we call it a cross-crawl motion. So if you're walking, your arms are sort of moving like this, okay? And your legs are moving, and your arms and your legs are moving like in opposite directions, okay? So what happens, you sort of twist your spine one way, twist your spine the other way, okay? So this cross-crawl, or we can say figure 8 motion, is something that's very, very natural. So the reason that's important is that all of the receptors in our body are situated in places to be able to perceive these motions. And those motions particularly promote function. Has anyone ever heard their doctor say, just walk, it's good for you? Everyone knows walking is good for you. What do you do when you're walking? It's that figure 8 motion, okay? So doing figure 8 motions are going to stimulate the joints in a way that's going to activate the receptors, which are going to have the greatest potential for promoting long-term health. You get that? That's cool, right? So all of the joints are designed to move that way. So if we look at the spine, if I turn my head to the right, if my head turns to the right, my neck naturally wants to bend to the right. Because what happens is your head's kind of, if I'm not moving, or if I am moving, what's happening is my shoulders are moving, but my head's sort of looking like it's staying still. But what's actually happening between my head and my shoulders is my head's kind of moving like this, okay? But instead what's happening is your shoulders are going like this, okay? So in other words, if my shoulders are going like this, it's the same thing as my head going like that. You get it? Okay? So our neck is designed to move that way. So when people come to me with a neck problem, I have to look at it and say, how well is your neck moving in this figure 8 motion? if I see that it isn't moving very well in that motion, then there's a high probability that that's affecting your ability to feel that motion. Will that have an effect on your system? Will it have an effect on the potential to activate your neocortex? Guess? Yeah, it will. Will that have an effect on your activation of your vestibular spinal pathway, on the output to your spine? So to trick your question, yes, it's true. But what's happening is you're creating a little bit of a confusion in your brain, okay? So if I'm walking and my eyes see my head move, my eyes see the world move in a certain way, so I turn my head. My eyes see the world go by in a certain way, okay? And my vestibular inner ear senses my head move, but then my joints and my neck aren't moving so well. I'm getting aberrant information or bad data, okay? Because it's like that joint can't feel that joint, my joint isn't giving my brain the signal that says your head's moving that way because the joint is not moving very well, okay? You understand? So in the joints you have bones, they're held together by muscles and there's layers of muscles around them. The deepest muscles stabilize, the further muscles are away, muscles that are further away, when they contract, they can actually move your joints, okay? Whereas the muscles that are close to the spine, when they contract, they hold the joints together and give stability, okay? So if any of those muscles are out of balance, the muscles that stabilize the joint, if it's contracting on one side, it might be sort of tight on one side, but then it's going to switch off the other side. So I won't be able to, well, say it's this way, okay? I won't be able to move my head this way because the muscles on this side are too tight. If I try to bend my head this way, it'll move too much. You see? So it'll be unstable. So say we're talking about the deepest muscles of the spine. If the deepest muscles are tight on the left side, okay, well, okay, I'll say it the other way. Say the muscles are tight on the right side. Okay, you say it in your own neck, okay? If the muscles are tight on the right side, then what's going to happen is going to be hard to turn to tip to the left, or turn to the left, because the muscles are resisting that. Say I try to tip your head to the right, the muscles that stabilize your neck aren't doing a very good job. So what's going to happen when you try to move it, your body's going to go, oh, I don't like this motion. Let's contract some other muscles to try to keep that joint from moving, because I don't want it to move too much. It's going to pull the joint apart. It's not stable. So I need to recruit some other muscles as a compensation to try to promote some stability. Does that work well? No.
You're out of sync.
You're out of sync. It doesn't work well for a lot of reasons. One is there's extrinsic muscles, these muscles over here that are kind of coming in to sort of say, well, let's hold the whole thing together. We'll just contract all this down and we'll hold this forever to try to stabilize that joint. Is that a good fix? No, it's a terrible fix, but it's what the body does when it's the only solution, okay? It's what your body's going to do when it's the only solution. It's going to contract those muscles, but we have what we call intrinsic muscles, the stabilizing muscles, or extrinsic muscles that move you. So these intrinsic muscles can contract all day long, no problem. It's possible to have your postural muscles working perfectly all day long. That should not be a problem, okay? And we already have some tools. We're going to finish up telling you how you can promote that. But these extrinsic muscles are really just designed to move you. Like, I want to move this way, and then I'm going to stop moving that way. I'm going to move this way, I'm going to stop moving that way. Okay? They're not designed to do that all day long. It's imagine holding a tray. You know? If you're holding a tray out here, you can't do that all day long. Those are those extrinsic muscles. They're not designed to hold all day long. People are like, oh my God, my neck is so sore and tight. I feel so uncomfortable. And it's like, oh, it goes all the way down here to my shoulder. It's tight there because that's just a compensation muscle for what's happening in the stability function of the spine. Okay? So they say, oh, I went to get a massage. Felt great. But it's back the next day. Okay? It felt great because it moved, but then if you actually tried to do something, you probably hurt yourself because it had a function, it had a reason for being there. It's not the best way of dealing with it, but if that muscle was tight, it had a reason. Okay? So if you get that muscle to relax, the joint will still be unstable underneath it. Okay? You get that? This is what we see all day. As chiropractors, this is what we see. People come in with joint problems. This is what we see. Okay? So now you're looking at it through our eyes. Okay? So, how do we deal with that? It's a tricky question, right? What do you think? Do we have the answer yet? Anyone think?
We have to strengthen the stabilizers somehow.
Yeah, strengthen the stabilizers and try to loosen that joint, right? So how can we get that stabilizing muscle to relax enough that it's not going to be inhibiting the other side? That would be a good solution, right? Okay? Would that be a good solution, you think? If we get that tight muscle to relax, then that will work. So Serge, I want you to relax the rotatores. No, I'm just joking. So those aren't under conscious control. So how do we get those muscles to relax? Well, as chiropractors, this isn't like a chiropractic promotion, but one of the things we can do is we can zero in on that muscle and just stretch that muscle very fast. Okay? When we stretch the muscle very, very fast, what happens is the force of that stretch of the muscle is sensed primarily by the sensors at the ends of the muscle. We call the Golgi tendon organ, and they're the load sensor in the muscle. So in other words, you put a big fast load on the muscle, and it stimulates the Golgi tendon organ, okay, which is again just a sensor. But the effect of that sensor is to decrease the tone of the muscle. So if you put a big stretch on the muscle, just very, very fast pulsive stretch, it will stimulate that particular part of the muscle that's tight, okay, the end part where the Golgi tendon organ is, and trigger a resetting of that length of muscle. So we call it resetting the gain of the muscle. So you reset that muscle to a new length. Okay? This is exactly how chiropractic works. We find what muscle is tight, and we stretch it, and we create a reset. We reset the gain of the muscle. So it now has a new length. It stops inhibiting the other side. The other side can contract appropriately, and then we have joint stability. But then wait a minute, we still have those extrinsic muscles that are tight. Do we have to do anything about that? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes your body goes, oh wait, why is this tight? I don't need it to be tight anymore, and then just melts away. Sometimes you feel it, you're like, oh, that works. It's fine. Sometimes you have to do something else to get that muscle to help the body believe that it can make that muscle relax without the joint falling apart. So sometimes we do like a little slow stretch on the muscle, okay? To help that muscle, just that extrinsic muscle just relax, almost like a massage. But if the body isn't telling that muscle to contract anymore, because it knows that the joint is stable, then it will just melt away. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay? What about things that are moving your joints? Or what about exercising muscles? What about activating extensors? Okay? What about doing cross-crawl things? Are these going to be good for you? Yeah, they will. So sometimes we can do general things to promote health, and sometimes we need to do specific things. Okay? So we only have about half an hour left, so I want to try to talk a little bit about the specific things that you can do if there's a joint that isn't moving. Okay? Yes, you can go to a chiropractor. I'm a little bit busy, but I will see you if you need. I'm not trying to promote myself, but I want to give you the tools to be able to help yourself. So I'm going to tell you what I do, because I don't really have a chiropractor. This is no one that I go to. So I'm going to show you what I do. Okay? Is that cool? So, one of the things that we do is focus on this figure 8 motion and just explore that motion, okay? So, I gave you like one example. Tai Chi is really fun because it's like a whole body kind of thing, and you kind of think about what your hips are doing in relation to your arms. You're doing these sort of motions like this. That all feels great, okay? But sometimes you can just kind of break off into something that feels a little bit different, where you're sort of moving your arms in a different way, right? Like you put some music on and you start moving your body in a different way. And what will happen is, when you have music and you're in kind of the mood, even if you're not in the mood, you put the music on, if it's good music, you're going to start moving to that music in a way where you're going to explore your body, and you're going to feel where those bits are tight. And then you can actually just kind of explore it and go, oh wow, it feels good when I do that, right? That's great for you, okay? Because you're going to that joint where it's tight, and you're creating a conscious stretch of that joint. You're doing it in a way that feels comfortable, that doesn't feel like you're going to fall apart or you're unstable, but you're going to be promoting motion in that area. Okay? If you've been to any of my talks before, like at Earth Garden, the Bubble, we usually talk about kind of esoteric things, like how spirituality and stuff tie in with the brain. That's fun stuff, okay? I could talk about that all day long. Today, we're talking about the practical things about your body and how your brain functions, because I want you to understand it from the most realistic perspective I can give, okay? So one of the things you can do is put some music on and boogie, okay? Go slow, go fast, just do what feels good, but think about the whole reason for doing that is to explore what your body can do and what it can't do. And if you feel something that's a little bit tight, just kind of explore it and say, oh, does it feel good to do this? It does feel good to do that. So you just keep exploring those motions and try to get a feel for it. It's great to start with that figure 8 motion, okay? We're designed to move through this figure 8 motion. So if you're doing exercises where you start with kind of that circular kind of weaving back and forth motion, that's going to be great for you, okay? The next motion is what I call the C motion, okay? C. So just put your body into C shapes. So imagine if you have like a little C shape like this. I can let my body go into a C shape like this, or a C shape like that, or a C shape like this, and you can kind of move through these sort of C shapes, okay? Okay, even like having a whole C shape in your body, even like that Tai Chi thing we're talking about, there's like a C shape here, and there's a C shape here, right? And you're just kind of letting your body form like a curve, okay? Your body is meant, even though there's lots of bones that are rigid things, you're designed to be able to form curves and shapes, okay? So the C shape and the figure 8 are really two components of the same thing. They're just little mental constructs that allow you to explore your body motions in a way that's going to allow you to feel those tensions and to move through those intentions, move through those motions, okay? Do you get that? This is really cool stuff because what you're doing is, when you're doing this, think about all the stuff we're talking about. What are you activating when you're boogieing around and moving, okay? For one, you got all that feel-good factor from the music. It's fun music, okay? You're extending, okay? You're exploring those end ranges of motion and where there's restrictions, and you're consciously moving through those restrictions in a way that's going to make you more supple and make you trust those end ranges. So when you can trust that your body can take you to those places and feel good in those places, then it's actually going to make it easier to get to those places, easier to move fluidly through a wider range of motion. If we're very, very restricted and we're not moving that much, then we're not getting as much stimulation as we need to promote the activation all the way up, all that neocortical activation. Do you guys get that? It's pretty cool, isn't it? Okay, good. So if we have stability, we're going to go back to the first concepts again. If we have stability, then we can contract muscles, can't we? We can have strength because our body can trust that it can move without compromising. Do you get that? Okay, so if our body trusts our stabilizing mechanism, we can move with strength. Sometimes I see, bodybuilders or athletes, they'll come in and they'll test a muscle and it's like, this muscle doesn't work. How can you run a marathon when you don't have any spinal stability, hip stability, knee stability, foot stability? They're like, yeah, it hurts, my whole right side hurts. You're like, well, you're ruining yourself. You're really hurting yourself. If you can't stabilize your hip, like I'll say, hold your leg out here, and then the leg just goes, and like, try it, and they're like, oh! They can't do it at all, okay? Every time you run and you land on that leg, that muscle needs to contract, okay? If it can't stabilize your hip, so in other words, we're talking about a muscle here called tensor fascia lata. I see it all the time. Tensor fascia lata, weak. It's an extensor muscle. So many people. What happens when this is weak? The opposite muscles get tight back here in your hip. Oh, what's my sciatica? Right? So those muscles get tight, these get weak. These muscles essentially bring your leg this way, but how often do you do this? Every time you take a step. Every time you take a step, you do this. Because what's happening is you take a step onto that leg, you're coming off, say, your left leg onto your right leg. What's going to happen is you're going to step onto that leg. Your body, you've actually propelled your body to the right, and you don't want to keep going to the right. You need to stop your body from going to the right. So you need a force that's going to push out that way to stabilize, right? So if I step from my left foot to my right foot, and I can't contract this muscle to keep me up, then the hip's going to go this way. You get it? So if that muscle can't contract, your hip's going to go like this. You're going to have a weak hip there. Or people will say, oh, I just walking along, my leg gave way. It's because your hip wasn't stable. The tensor fasciae lata was weak. You stepped in a way that demanded your body to sense the motion on an inhibited muscle. So your body couldn't increase the activation of that muscle to maintain stability in that joint. Okay? You lost your sort of axis, your balance, and the joint moved more than it should. And then you had to compensate with something else. Does that make sense? Tensor fasciae lata also goes down all the way down to the outside of the knee, and it stabilizes the knee from your leg going further forward like this. So it essentially holds your leg back, and it limits this rotation. So it pulls back like that. So every time you're taking a step, and your body's sort of lunging forward, your lower leg will tend to go forward as well. Tensor fasciae lata is going to stabilize that. So if that's not functioning, your knee will rotate more than it should and shoot forward more than it should. What does that affect? What happens if your leg goes too far forward? Anterior cruciate, your ligament. How many people have blown their anterior cruciate? A lot. How many of those people have a weak tensor fasciae lata? All of them. Okay? You're not going to blow it unless that muscle is weak. Okay? Pretty well guaranteed. 26 years I've been seeing patients. I haven't had one that wasn't. Okay? So tensor fasciae lata, always weak is the anterior cruciate. What happens if your knee rotates too much every time you're taking a step or you're running? This rotation here, is that good for your knee? Your knee's a hinge joint. Yeah, it can rotate a little bit, but not so much. It's not meant to do that. It's meant to be a hinge joint. So what happens if it's rotating? Meniscus. It rotates like this. Medial meniscus, like boom, blows. Okay? How many people have heard of medial meniscus problems? Loads. How many of those people have tensor fasciae lata issues? All of them. Okay? I'm not here to make generalizations, but this is something that you see a lot. Okay? If these extensor muscles are weak on this side, you're going to have less capacity to stabilize your foot as well. These muscles on the front of your leg are also extensors. So if the flexors are tight, then you're going to have too much inhibition of those extensors. So when you take a step, your foot could roll more easily. It also helps with your arch. What happens with your arch? Goes flat. Okay? Anyone ever heard of these issues? Arch problems, ankle problems, knee problems. Also, when this is weak, your body's going to contract another muscle on the back called popliteus, which further rotates your knee. That makes the whole situation even worse. So these are very, very common things. Okay?
Russ,
Yeah.
normally the TFL presents itself as very tight.
Yep.
Even though it's weak, but it's really, really tight.
Yep. Yeah, you'll see that. It's true. Even though the muscle can be inhibited, you'll sense it as tension. Okay? And you see, like, people say, oh, my iliotibial band, because the TFL connects into a big band that goes down the side of your leg. So it's like a muscle with a really long tendon. Okay? So when it contracts, it pulls on that iliotibial band. People are like, oh, my iliotibial band's going nuts today, right? It's going nuts because your body can't compensate very well. Okay? We can get into more of the physiology of what happens, why you feel that tension. But I promise you, if you can do something to turn down the tension of the deep gluteal muscles and activate the extensor muscles on that side, then everything's going to work. Sometimes we just activate something even in the neck. You get that neck to move the way that it should, and then this whole side of your body can actually inhibit those flexors. So let me just quickly go and answer Anita's question a little bit more, because it kind of ties a few things together. You know how I was saying your neocortex inhibits and calms down those flexors? It does it on the same side. So most people know that if I move my left hand, that's coming from my right brain. But your right brain also regulates the flexor tone on the same side. So we call it ipsilateral, same side, ipsilateral descending cortical pathway. You get that though, right? That's a big word. Ipsilateral descending cortical pathway. That makes sense. Everyone get that? You get it. That's cool. Okay? These are big words. You get it now, right? So the ipsilateral descending pathway is going to inhibit flexor tone, which will promote extensor function. Is that cool? Good. How do we stimulate prefrontal cortex on the right side? Anyone have any idea? Oh, you know. How do you stimulate prefrontal cortex? With different types of movements. Extension. Extension is going to promote prefrontal cortical activation. Even meditation is very, very good for activating prefrontal cortex. Okay? So meditation, these figure 8 motions, that C motion, exploring these motions are all things that are going to drive those higher centers, which are going to promote the potential for extension, which is then going to promote long-term potentiation, or the potential to activate extensor muscles over time. You get it? So we've talked about some crazy, crazy, complex stuff. You get it now. We'll tie everything back together again, okay? So let me just quickly check the time. Got a few more things I want to say. Okay, so it's 20 past. So yeah, Elena?
So we sort of exercise and movements that you were talking about and somehow look like the upper body.
Yep.
We're aiming for the lower specifically.
Yep. What's everyone into now? Squats, right? What are squats? Extension, right? Squats are awesome. Okay? Anything that promotes extension is going to be great for you. I don't want to tell you specifically, do this or do that. I can. I mean, we're going to have questions in just... in a few minutes, we're going to have questions. And you can throw all that stuff out at me. But what I want you to understand is to be able to... I want you to go to whatever exercise you feel like doing and think about it for a second with a coffee and say, I know why that's good for me. You know? I know what that's doing to my brain. I know that that's activating my vestibular system, my head motion. I know it's activating my eyes. I know it's activating those proprioceptors, particularly in my neck. That's great. Okay? That's going to activate that area. It's going to promote stability in my spine. When I do coordinated motions, like these figure 8 motions, or just cross-crawl motions, like I'm on the treadmill, why is that good for me? I'm doing a cross-crawl motion. This figure 8 motion is great for my neocortex. That's why I feel so awake and alert. I'm promoting my neocortex. I'm activating even autonomic functions. So it's helping me activate the system that's distributing fuel around my body. So I feel good. Right? It makes sense. So we're going to go to questions in just a second. We have those 3 things we're talking about. Stability. You get that now, right? Those intrinsic muscles are reflexive. You can't consciously turn them on. But every time you move your eyes, you also do. So sometimes people do like eye exercises. There's a new thing called gaze stabilization, where you look at something and you kind of move your head from side to side, okay? And what are you doing? If I'm looking at something and I move my head from side to side, I'm stimulating my vestibular system, and I'm actually, which is turning my head to the side, and I'm trying to match this movement of my head to the exact same vector of motion of my eyes. So that my head is moving in one direction, my eyes are moving in the opposite and equal direction. So that what that does is it accentuates your ability to sense how much motion your head moves through your vestibular system and your proprioceptors in your neck, and it's going to match it to an opposite motion of your muscles that move your eyes. Do you get it? So in order for me, if my head turns like this, in order for me to get my eyes to stay stuck to that target over there, what I have to do is I have to be aware of how much my head is turning. How do I find out how much my head is turning? From the proprioceptors and the vestibular system. Okay? So anytime I'm doing what we call a gaze stabilization exercise, where you're looking at one thing and you're moving your head in the opposite direction, that's really working that system that's then driving the vestibular output, which is to the spine, to stabilize. So us as practitioners, if we see someone with an unstable spine, I'll send them home with an exercise and I'll say, I want you to look at a dot and I want you to turn your head from side to side like this, okay? And try to stay focused on that dot. They're like, this is a bit silly, isn't it? But if I told you to do that, you'd probably be a little bit more excited about it because you're now aware of the effect that that's having on the long-term potential for your body to stabilize itself. You get it? It's fun, right? That's called gaze stabilization. So if you want to look it up, Look up gaze stabilization, something simple. You just go like this, or you can go up and down. We call these no-nos, we call these yes-yeses. This is very simple. We're all very simple. When we talk about complex things in neurology, we use simple things. These are called no-nos. These are called yes-yeses. Okay? But you can also do things at angles like this, okay? Or you can follow like a figure 8 motion with your eyes. That's great too. I like those. Okay? Something else I have people do is I say, pretend like you're swimming, okay? Without water. So don't flap around on the ground. But pretend like you're swimming towards a dot in front of you, okay? You swim like this. What is that doing? What's this doing to my system? Okay? Is it stimulating my proprioceptors? And my neck and my shoulder? When I'm like this, where's my head? It's turned all the way to the left. I can't turn more left. I can turn right, but I can't turn left. If I turn this way, my head's turned right, but see, I can turn left, but I can't turn further right. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm using my arms to turn my neck. You get it? What's happening to my vestibular system? Nothing. Wait a minute. If I'm doing this, and I'm not stimulating my vestibular system, then how does my brain know where my head is? Are my eyes moving? Not really. Is my vestibular system getting information? No. What's happening? How do I know where my head is? Only from what? The joint proprioceptors. Ooh, this is interesting. This is interesting because what I can do is I can use a particular exercise to promote a bias towards proprioception. I want my body to stabilize my neck so that I can move my shoulders, but in order to do that, I need to know where my head is. And the only way I know where my head is by listening really closely to my joint proprioceptors. This is what we call a bias. So I can do an exercise that has a bias to make my body focus more on joint proprioceptors. Wow, that's interesting. Okay, what system fails most of the time? Is it your vestibular system? Not so often. Is it your eyes? Your eyes, most of the time, people do have eye issues. That's another deep, deep, deep issue. We're not going to get into that. Let's just assume they're pretty okay. What system fails the most? Proprioceptors, because we're all getting bashed on the head, we're doing stupid stuff, we've fallen off bicycles, we're doing crazy things to our body, and all the joints just get bashed and bent all over the place. We sleep in funny ways, wake up in a bathtub. We've all done it, right? Okay? So then you're like, oh my God, my neck. Well, what is that? What's the long-term effect of that? If your neck isn't moving, it's going to throw off this sense of where your head is. If you have this little mismatch, we didn't get into it too much, so let me just quickly go to it. Is if those joints aren't moving very well, what's going to happen is your brain's not going to trust it as much. Okay? You're going to have to do some calculations and go, wait a minute, the neck isn't moving. It's not giving me so much information about where I am because the joints have all been all twisted in weird ways and they're not moving the way they should. They're all unstable. You're not getting as much stimulation as you should because they're not moving. So what is your brain going to rely on to figure out where your head is? Vision and vestibular system. So what happens to these people when you walk into the toilet at night and you can't see anything, it's dark, and you're just relying on your vestibular system? You don't have a whole lot of feedback from your joint proprioceptors. These are the people that are like, holy crap, I can't walk at night. I go to the toilet and I'm falling all over the place, right? Because they're only relying on, they have a bias towards vision or a bias towards vestibular function, okay? But your ability to use that vestibular function effectively is really tied very intimately with being able to put those three things together. Your vision, the vestibular system, and your proprioception. So when proprioception gets thrown off, it throws that whole function. So you really lose that sense of where you are. You need to know your position in order to be able to control your motion. Okay? So this is a really, really important thing. This year at Earth Garden, we're going to be talking about perception. So we're going to kind of really dig into that. There's a little bit of esoteric stuff, so if you're like that kind of stuff, we'll kind of go in there, okay? But we're going to talk really about perception a lot and how your brain perceives things, okay? But at least you know the underlying functions of how your body ties all this information together. So if these joints aren't moving effectively, your brain develops a bias towards vision and vestibular function. vestibular afferentation or stimulation. Okay? So if we're doing an exercise that's going to create a bias towards proprioception, is that going to be a good thing for you? Yeah, it should be good, especially if you're doing some exercises and really stretching those joints out and you get the joints moving better, and then you're doing something that's going to create a bias. Your brain just has to figure out, listen to your motion of your proprioceptors in your neck and your shoulders to figure out where you are. That activity is going to shift the bias. Is that going to be a good thing for you? Absolutely.
Also, exercising in the dark or moving in the dark.
Anything. You have the tools now. So you can come up with it. You do what feels good to you. Okay? You do what feels good. Okay? You know now. If you guess, I bet you'll get it right. Okay? It's cool, right? So now you have the tools to understand why some things are good for you, okay? And exactly how they're good for you. You want to do things that are going to promote stability, because if your body is stable, then you can control, you have strength, okay? You have flexibility. You don't have this extra muscle tension trying to compensate for an unstable joint. So you have strength and flexibility now. Can those muscles work long term now? Yeah, absolutely. If those intrinsic muscles are working well, they're designed to contract and contract and contract all day long, no problem. Okay? So if you're activating that system, you can keep activating extension. If you keep activating extension, that's going to keep stimulating prefrontal cortex and those higher centers of your brain. What is that going to do? That's going to promote the ability to inhibit flexor muscles and create more activation of extensor muscles, which again, extension is going to promote more what? Activation to where? Prefrontal cortex, those higher centers. So the more capable you are of extending through activation of the spinal intrinsic muscles, which keep your spine posture good, okay? The more you're going to be able to inhibit, you're going to activate your prefrontal cortex, which again is going to inhibit flexor musculature so that you can control more, create more activation of extensor muscles and create more extension and more electricity that's going to drive that neocortex. Does the neocortex like that? Loves it, lives on it. If it doesn't have it, it starts to fall apart. Okay, so anything we're doing is going to drive that neocortex, is going to make you feel really, really good. You guys get it? You have some tools now, okay? The most important tool I can give you is the ability to think, the ability to understand how your body works. Once you know that, you can figure all the rest out yourself, okay? I'm not going to tell you this is good, this is bad, okay? Most important thing is that you know how your system works, and it'll just be absolutely obvious to you what's good for you and what isn't. And you'll be able to look at the things that you want to do, and you'll be able to approach it in a different way now, where you can say, I'm going to do this, but it's like I'm going to be aware of what this is doing to my nervous system and how this is activating systems that are going to create the potential for function for the long term. You guys get that? That's pretty good, isn't it? For an hour and a half of your time? It's like, that's a pretty good use of your time. So again, now I actually will say thank you very much everyone for coming. I really appreciate all your attention. I hope that that was something very exciting to you. Again, I appreciate Sonia sponsoring this and bringing everyone, creating the space and promoting and bringing everyone out. I've had a lot of fun. So I'm going to say thank you very much and thanks for coming. Now, does anyone have any questions? Any questions? No questions. I answered everyone's question. Oh wait, Anton, okay, sorry.
Yeah, do you risk triggering some like dizziness problems or anything of the sort, or is it okay if someone's prone?
If someone has something that isn't working well, the system is obviously not managing certain situations very well. So in kind of a medical, I mean, as a medical doctor.
Sometimes someone turns their head and all of a sudden they're...
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the advice there is just to try to get to someone that can fix the core issues underlying that, but then you actually might be using some head motions to try to compensate for that, or you might even be doing this thing I was saying where you create a bias towards proprioception, so you're going to be able to stimulate that whole vestibular area, but without activating the vestibular system. Yeah, exactly. So one of the things that people often do with dizziness is like an Epley's maneuver. You know Epley's? Wow, a lot of people know Epley's. Wow, that's cool. So Epley's is basically you lay someone on their side, you have their head tipped to the side, they go, oh my God, I feel so dizzy, and you wait till the dizziness goes, and you flip them over and the head on the other side. Okay? And what you're doing is the person is trying to, what happens is you lay them on one side, and their brain is trying to figure out where they are. Okay? And then they're using the proprioceptors and those tilt sensors. And so basically what you're doing is you're creating a bias for the brain. All of the information it's getting is basically from your tilt sensors and your proprioceptors. Okay? And then you wait till your body kind of gets used to that position of the head, and the proprioceptors and the tilt sensors kind of agree with each other. Then you flip them over, and things are kind of messed up, and your body goes, oh, wait a minute, oh, I'm tipped to the right. Okay? And then it gets kind of calibrates, we say, so that your brain agrees what your tilt sensors in your vestibular system, your inner ear, are saying with what your proprioceptors are saying. Okay? And then people get back up, and they're like, I'm not dizzy anymore. So that fixes a lot of people, but the people it doesn't fix, my theory, don't take this for gold, but my theory is that there's probably something else going on. Maybe there's a proprioceptive issue, there's a joint problem that isn't allowing those proprioceptors to give enough quality information that you can calibrate properly. So, you know, as in my profession, I'm blessed with the tools to be able to calibrate the joint. Okay, I can create stretch on the joint and basically get that joint stable again, get all those muscles around it to work properly, and then when I know the joint's working, you can do something like a calibration maneuver, and then it's going to fix it. Okay? Some people use a calibration thing first. Some people use the proprioceptive thing first. I do it either way. You have to choose when you're seeing that patient. But
No, I don't do it myself, but sometimes there are people who suffer.
you see it a lot. And another component of this is that sometimes people have these problems for years, and there's layers upon layers upon layers of compensation. You know, what we've explained isn't enough for you to go into practice and to try fixing all these people now, but it's enough for you to understand yourself, okay? When you actually have a patient in front of you, you have to consider everything. So it's not like a total, you're not all neurologists now, I'm sorry. But, yeah.
Thank you very, very much. I have to go.
It's okay, yeah. Appreciate that, yeah. Thank you very much.
Lots of questions.
Okay, yeah. Send me on Facebook or something, okay? Okay, ciao. So yeah, sometimes because of the longevity of the issue and the way your body is compensating, it does sometimes take more time to resolve those things and you know, digging a little bit deeper. Emma, you had a question?
Yes, I have. Can you explain what happens to the vestibular system when you're physically stable, but for example, when you're at sea, and so everything else is moving, but you're not, but your vision is all over the place. So does that confuse?
Let's look. That's a good question.
Yeah.
Really good question. Let's look at what is the difference between being at sea and being on deck and being at sea and being down below.
No, on deck. I'm saying. Well, you're asking
No.
what the difference is.
Yeah, just tell me. What would typically happen? Someone that feels a little bit confused when you're on deck, and how would they feel if they went down below? Would they feel better or worse?
Worse.
Usually worse, because you don't have the horizon.
Yeah.
You can't, if you're not seeing the windows and your eyes can't tell your brain where the horizon is, because actually what's happening is you are moving.
Yeah.
You are moving. You're with the boat, and the boat's moving, and the boat's rocking. So what's happening is gravity is suddenly here, and then the boat tips to the side, and gravity's over there. Okay, then the boat tips this way, and gravity's over here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. But your system's telling you to compensate, right?
Exactly.
But you're not.
You're not actively trying to move your body, but your body, that vestibular system is still getting activated because you're still tilting, and that vestibular system is still telling your spine to stabilize. I'm bending to the side, even though you're not moving. The boat tips you, and then your vestibular system gets activated, and it's going to contract those muscles to keep you stable. Because if the boat tipped and you didn't do that, you'd fall apart.
Right.
So that system has to be activated in order to hold you together.
But can that situation like cause an out of sync in your body?
Yes.
If it's not.
So let's look at it this way. Let's say if your brain isn't capable of integrating your visual, vestibular, and proprioceptive information accurately, then you're going to have a better or less good sense of where you are. You're going to have a less good sense of where you are because your brain isn't able to put all the information together for whatever reason. Just say whatever reason. Okay? So when you put yourself in a situation where there's these sort of perturbations, these movements, okay, which are kind of passive motions, and you're relying on this system to hold you together and to put all the information together about where you are, if that system is a little bit confused or your proprioceptive system's turned off, okay, or even if you have a vestibular problem, okay, you're going to feel really terrible when you get on the boat. Motion sickness, yeah, exactly. So the people that feel that, they go, oh, I just have to look at the horizon. They're like people that get seasick, they say, oh, all you have to do is go on deck and look at the horizon, just breathe. They're like, you know, the boat's going like this, you're focusing on the horizon, you're trying to create a bias towards vision because your proprioceptive system isn't working very well. You really work on that bias of vision, and then it's like, okay, oh, I'm all right. Then you go back down below and you're like, because your vestibular system's right next to the vagus. You get that vagal output and you feel sick. Okay, so that dizziness and that sense of knowing where you are is really connected to your body's ability to control all of those autonomic functions associated with digestion. If that whole system's kaput or really fragile, you're going to feel nauseous, you're going to feel sick.
But apart from the digestion and nauseous can it cause joint issues as well?
You could have joint issues at the same time. You could, if that whole system isn't working very well, then to answer your question as precisely as I could, I'd say that there's a higher probability that you'd have a joint stability issue. Not you, whoever we're talking about, the person that's hanging over the edge of the boat. Okay, so yes. Yes, probably yes. Okay? More questions? Nita?
One final
Yeah?
well, first of all, thank you very much. It was really informative.
Great.
And I totally agree with you about the extension part where we're all hunching forward in flexion all the time, and extension will actually help us. However, you mentioned the example of a runner, for example, doing the figure of 8.
Yeah.
I love the idea of boogieing and getting yourself moving, basically. But think about the runner who's already doing the figure of 8, essentially, but they're not doing it properly.
Right.
Because they have weaknesses, they've got imbalances through compensation.
Yeah.
Right? So in that case, surely shouldn't the answer be then yes, you do need to seek professional help to help release as you mentioned yourself with when you stretch the Golgi tendon quickly, and then they need to start practicing proper exercises to stabilize the joints.
Yep, exactly. So that's a great question, and there's lots of questions in there, so let me pick them all out. By the way, if anyone needs to leave, then I won't be offended. You can get up and go, it's not a problem. But as long as people have questions, I'd like to stay. I don't have any time limitations, so we can keep going as long as the room's okay to use. So lots of things in there. If someone's doing a figure 8 motion and their body has compensations that mean that there's weaknesses and instabilities, and that motion itself is actually going to be challenging to their joints, then yeah, maybe they should step back from that until they can resolve those issues. 100% agree. What you want to do is to try to do something that has a high transferability of function. Okay, so doing an exercise, like I know with Pilates, you can do exercise, you're going to promote strength and stability in other areas. So that would be a good thing to do. If there is a joint that's involved, then addressing that joint function is also a good thing to do. The tools I'm expressing about, like doing this figure 8 motion, it doesn't necessarily have to be running. You could just be standing still in a room and just boogieing around, and that's going to be curative, it's going to be restorative, that's going to help those issues if they can kind of explore those motions, or if they go to someone who can stretch it or something, or even, I mean, there are some forms of like sports massages and things like this where they can actually work and have some longer term effects on those muscles, and that's a good thing. But generally you want to be doing it actively, you know? So anything that's going to help to promote the strength and stability of those joints will have a high transferability of function for stabilization through whatever exercise they're doing. So yeah, great question, really, really good. But a lot of layers in there as well, okay? Anyone else have more questions? Any even specific things about our own bodies? Yeah?
First of all, thanks so much for your energy. You're like the biology teacher I wish I had. It was you.
Cool, thank you.
You explain in ways that it really is the catch-all. I have had a kyphosis all my life, and I was told it's like a kind of disease, so I kind of accepted it. But lately I've been trying to improve it.
Yep.
Is there a kind of, because one of the things which always struck me was it always felt like holding my hands up to stand up straight. Now when I'm listening to you talk, I kind of realize it's probably not the internal muscle, but the external one. That's why I'm getting tired.
Well, when you have so the question is, you have a kyphosis and you're wondering why you have the kyphosis,
No,
or?
it's not even an issue anymore. In the sense that I don't really care why, I just want to try and figure out how I can improve myself.
How you improve it?
Yeah, but no, I always felt that when people told me stand up straight, I'd stand up straight, and then after a while I'd be like, screw this kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that I'm compensating, so like those internal muscles are probably not really working well. Is there a kind of...
You answered your own question.
No, it's
Yeah.
not the question. The question is, are there things which are smarter to do first? So is it smarter to start to stretch or to flex first, or would it be like a combination of all, not really?
I would say that the cross-crawl motions are very good, because that's going to promote the activation of higher centers. Those higher centers are going to be able to inhibit flexor muscles, which are going to be the things that are pulling you forward. So anything that's going to promote extension is going to be good for you. So you don't have to just do this. That's not the only solution. You could be doing exercises that promote extension of your thoracic spine. So if you're hunched forward like this, doing things where you're pulling your arms back or extending your back are going to be great for you. Okay? So doing extension is going to be great.
Sorry.
Okay, it's okay. Okay, no problem. Yeah, you're very welcome.
Sorry.
So anything that's going to promote extension of your arms and opening up of your chest is going to be great for you. Okay? So if you're doing it actively, that's great. If you want to sort of get on like a foam roller or something and like lean back and lay on the foam roller and extend, that's probably good too. Just do it gently and carefully, and that'll feel great. Okay? So anything that's going to promote that extension, okay, is going to be great for you.
So it's a combination of all the things, the kind of like eye move, kind of...
Whatever you can dream up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything that's going to promote extension. So, you can do eye motions. That's going to help activate those intrinsic muscles. Okay. Anything that's going to promote extension is going to drive those neocortical areas and, again, inhibit flexors. So that's it. You can dream up the solution, whatever feels good for you. Now you have the tools. Right? More questions? I'm sure there's lots of questions. Yeah?
Yes. You mentioned before, talking about motion sickness, about the vagus nerve. So
The who?
Vagus nerve. The
Vagus, yeah.
Vagus.
Yep.
And so how is this connected to these two types of muscle and the proprioception? Because I guess this involves also the digestive system and how we digest, the way we move.
Yep.
But what is what kind of muscle are the one you use for digestion, and how it's related to your thought?
So the output or the control of the autonomic function is divided into two main groups. We call sympathetic and parasympathetic. Okay, sympathetic is like the fight or flight. So that means you're either gonna get energy from storage and put it into your muscles so that you can either fight or run away. Okay, that's important for self-preservation. Sometimes you need to fight, and sometimes you need to run away. But your body's going to figure out how to do that. And that's sympathetic is all about taking energy from the gut and moving it into active energy that's in your bloodstream that you can use to feed the muscles and to activate the muscles so that you can run or fight. Sympathetic. Okay? Parasympathetic control is about bringing the energy and the function back to your gut. So that's when you eat a meal and you're like, you like really want to relax and you're like, I don't want to fight. I don't want to run away. I just want to sit here and chill out because I'm full and all my body's energy is focused right here on digestion. Okay? We call it the feed and the breed. Okay? To feed or to make more people, right? That's what breeding is. Okay? So breeding, all that function, sexual function, is also linked to parasympathetic function as well. So when people have problems with that system not working, it's probably because there's an imbalance between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. If we were to try to draw a little correlation between flexors and extensors, and sympathetic and parasympathetic, could you do that? Yeah, kind of. You kind of can. Sympathetic is about getting energy out so that you can use it, and parasympathetic is about restorative function. But this restorative function is also, the parasympathetic function is highly regulated through prefrontal cortex. Okay? This is something that we have that other animals don't have. Most animals don't have the ability to calm themselves down. Okay? So like when an animal, like say a cheetah goes and it gets a gazelle. I don't know, do cheetahs eat gazelles? I don't know. Whatever. So say the cheetah goes and it attacks something, it eats it. It's like, and then it gets it. It's like that. It has to pant for a while because it can't just go, wait, I'm just going to I'm really wound up right now. I'm just going to sit here. I'm going to meditate for a minute. Calm down. I'm going to have my meal. Have a nice Zen moment. Okay? A little candle. Beautiful. Cheetah doesn't do that. It's like, even your dog, you go out for a walk and you're like, whew, that was a good walk, good run. And the dog's sitting there for a while going, because it doesn't have that neocortex to calm itself down. So what happens is, because it doesn't have the ability to calm itself down, it actually can't live as long. So we say about dog years and things like that. They can't live as long because the parasympathetic system isn't as capable of preserving itself. It's about, the parasympathetic system is about giving attention and activation to the system that's going to help create long-term restorative functions in the body. It's about taking energy from your outer world, food, getting it into your body, and nourishing the body. That's what parasympathetic function is. Okay? So if that system isn't working very well, you're going to have digestive problems. Okay? It's going to turn on activation of the muscles of your gut. It's going to activate enzymes. How many people do you know who are gluten intolerant or all these other food sensitivities and things? It's probably because their neocortex, partly, I'm not going to make huge assumptions, I'm not accusing anyone of anything, okay? But there might be, possibly, that their prefrontal cortex isn't as capable of controlling and activating all of that awareness and sense of their gut, being able to respond to that new food with the appropriate enzymes, being able to move the food through your gut effectively so that it moves through at the right rate. Things go too slow, or you don't have the right enzymes, food starts to ferment and rot. You start to have stinky farts, okay? I'm blaming that, okay? You start to have stinky farts. Things don't move through effectively. You start to eat something and just bloat because your body just isn't digesting that food, and it just starts to create gas in your gut. You're like, oh, I eat gluten, and oh, wow, my gut's all, it's immediate, right? It just pops out because your digestive system isn't capable of breaking those things down, getting the energy out of it, and moving it through quickly, okay? So people have digestive problems. That's a parasympathetic control function. It's an autonomic function, and that's regulated through your prefrontal cortex. Thanks for coming. It's my wife. I got to relieve the babysitter. So parasympathetic function is really highly correlated to prefrontal cortical control. Say you don't have good digestive function. Say you are a little bit sensitive to certain foods and things. What do you think about doing some exercise, having a little boogie? Is that going to stimulate your prefrontal cortex? Is there a potential that could help your gut function? Yeah, it's pretty good. What about meditating? What does meditating affect? Prefrontal cortex. Okay, that's all cortical, high-level cortical function. You stimulate that system, you're going to create a greater probability of it having the ability to do its own thing. So if its thing is to calm the body down, you activate the prefrontal cortex, you can calm it down. So you take get down that gazelle, you light your candle, have a little meditate, and you enjoy it, like a cheetah can't. Okay? Not saying you have to kill a gazelle, nothing like that, okay? Okay? Does it make sense though, right? So I think maybe that answers your question. Otherwise there's just a little blabber about something, maybe that was interesting too.
Some episodes ahead of dysphagia, when some 10 years ago.
So you could break down all of those vagal functions, because you mentioned the vagus, into sympathetic and parasympathetic control systems, and you could look at what each one of them does. So does it move things through faster? Does it help bring blood and attention to your gut so that you can digest things, or does it take that energy away from your gut so that you can move? Okay, so you can look at all of those functions in that sense. So you can actually look on the internet. You can look at parasympathetic and sympathetic functions, and you see what's going on. And most of the things that people have are sympathetically dominant. Anything that's going to create a bias towards parasympathetic function is probably going to be good for you. So parasympathetic functions, neocortex. That's what makes that system work. Okay? It's pretty cool, isn't it? Okay? So we're talking about some really, really complex things about the brain, but we've kind of elevated our language enough that I can say crazy stuff like descending cortical pathways and inhibiting flexors ipsilaterally, and you're like, yeah, I got that. That's cool. No, I'm cool with that. Right? And now you have the ability to use those bits of information to make decisions for yourself that will be good decisions. They're going to promote long-term function in your body. Is that cool? You guys like it? Again, if you have any more questions, I'm going to be around afterwards. I'm not going to keep everyone sitting here. Feel free to come up if you have any questions. Thank you all very much for coming. I really appreciate it. Okay? Thank you. Thanks. Good.